Oh hey na, oh hey ni, oh hey na.
We always have been here because there was nobody here but us until they finally discovered us, because I was here when there was no road.
We're the small indigenous people of the Northwest who have been named the Makah, which are Kuditchaat in our language, that hunt whales, because it's something that kept us alive for years and years. Being by the sea, you know, who would think that we wouldn't be whaling?
You look around the bay, there's everywhere you go, there's pictures of whales or a canoe or something like that on the drums, on the dances. There's a lot to it.
Everything bases itself and it's centered around whaling, because ancient times it was a tremendous economic resource for us. And from that, the story where the first whale came to us by the spirit of the thunderbird, coming to our beaches to feed the people when they were hungry.
The chief, his tribe was starving, turned himself into this big, huge bird, and he went out, picked up a whale, and brought it into his village to feed his people.
From that day forward, whaling families who had the resources and the talent to become whalers, to bring this resource to the people, it developed songs, rituals, dances, belief systems, and stories that were passed on from generation to generation, which created this dominant part of our culture, which is the whaling part of our people.
It's not play, it's for real stuff, and it comes from way back.
Thousands of years. That's how we're raised, that's how we're taught. It's been brought from generation to generation to generation, and I'll teach it to my kids the same way.
Once you're born into whalers family, that's what you're into.
Dubak petka at po hachatup sex dub ootach chitapak.
The pictures you see in the museum, that's my great-grandfather down by the whaling canoes, which is Wilson Parker. I'm a descendant of him, who was a good whaler.
What it was to be a Makah male in the Makah tribe is to be a whaler, a sealer, a halibut fisherman, salmon, maker canoes, maker songs. I mean, there was something for them to do, but one by one, whatever it was that the man could do to provide for his family. See, the essential things that the Makah people knew. They provide for your family, protect your family, be the lover of the family, be the spiritual leader of your family. Bit by bit, those things got taken away.
What we currently are doing today is protecting our identity and protecting what belongs to us as far as culture and our land and our natural resources go.
It's important to me because there's the whaling, there's the treaty right involved. And there's people saying that the treaty is old, it's archaic, let's bring them up to, let's bring them up in today. Well, when you go back and realize that what the Makahs gave for that, to get this treaty, they gave up 300,000 acres of timberland.
Because land was valuable, but it wasn't as valuable as the water. It wasn't as valuable as the ocean, which had all of the things that we needed to live on.
They were already whalers. They for years had fished halibut and salmon and sockeye. They've been doing that. But that's what they wanted the government to promise, that we could continue this in perpetuity. And the government agreed to that. And they said, well, we will help you in your fishing endeavors, and we'll equip you. And that's one of the promises that they never kept.
I believe it's the only treaty with the United States that has that language attached to it. Well, we were renowned whalers, always known to do that, be whalers, so they made sure that that was part of our life.
Treaty didn't give us certain things. It's just certain things our signers had the foresight to reserve for us. So the government didn't give us the right to whale. We've always had that right, and we just wanted that put in the treaty so that we can always do what we have done.
If all we ever did was take sand fleas off the beach, if that was our economic resource, if it was only kelp or seaweed, that's the only thing, or clams, anything, it would have been in the treaty. We want to take all the salmon, fish, was in there, or anything. But at the time, whaling was this foundation of our people in this village.
A lot of people don't understand the treaty, that it's very important high law that our government made. We're in a generation now where they're losing the understanding of what a treaty is, or what it was, or why we made treaties.
It's just as important as the Constitution, because it's in a safe and secure place in Washington, D.C. right now under lock and key. It sits right there with the Constitution. It's a document that still defines that relation between the Makah and the U.S. government today. Nothing's changed.
And when two countries sit down and make a treaty, they have to have something in common.
Government is wanting to have a peaceful transition of the settlement of people moving to the west, so there would be no misunderstandings or even a war, and have a possibility of a war. So the United States government needed, in order to accomplish that, they needed to have title to the land which belonged to several of the tribes in the Northwest I'm speaking about.
So what did we bring to the table? We brought all our land and resources. The government says, we'll guarantee you a way of life.
If the government was going to take the property, what was most important to the Makah people then was that they have access to the marine resource, which lied right off the beaches and out into the ocean. They wanted to continue access because that was what their way of life was based upon, was for them to go out into the ocean and get the resources there. But the second meeting, he offered the tribe again to be farmers, to make farmers out. He would bring you the implements, and they says, no, we want to go fishing. We want to be in the water. In order to get this across to Stephen's mind, Chief Sakawth, our main signer, was successful in getting him into the water, Governor Stevens into the water, and took him out for a little canoe ride out there. And he says, you talk about real estate, you want land. He said, this is my country, the water, this is my country, that's what we want. So it became apparent to the governor then that if he was going to be successful in getting them across to the table, that he was going to have to assure them that they'll be able to continue to access the marine resource. So he promised them that we will, if you will sign a treaty, he made this promise that we'll help you with your fishing, we'll help you with your whaling, we'll bring you all kind of pots and pans so you can render the oil and you can market it. So, and once the tribe got that assurance from him, then they said, yes, we will sign a treaty. But it was not until after Governor Stevens knew that unless he gave him some kind of promise that they could continue accessing the marine resource, that he would never get them across the table. So that was how they entered that agreement.
In the decades that followed the signing of the treaty, the Makah watched as non-Indians decimated the natural resources on which they had always depended, eroding the very foundation of Makah culture. Forests were cut down, salmon stocks were overfished, and gray whales, due to the unregulated commercialized whaling by Yankee whalers, were hunted to near extinction.
You know, historically, Western culture didn't believe it could overexploit resources, that they were so vast and they were so huge that there's just no way that we could ever fish out the ocean or cut down all of the trees, where our understanding was that it's very easy to over-capitalize resources if you're not careful.
And so they were always prayerful, mindful of what was going on. They were actually laid down their harpoons, you know, up to 12 years before they were even asked to, because they seen the whales disappearing. And yet the United States government commercially whaled for 12 years after we laid our harpoons down. And if anyone really wants to begin to look at our stewardship, it's Native people are there of taking care of what God has given them.
Throughout this time, the promises of the treaties were ignored. If tribal members tried to exercise their reserved treaty right to fish for salmon in their traditional areas, they were arrested and put in jail by the state of Washington. They were told that their treaty rights did not exist. Some even challenged the historical claim of the Makah's fishing and whaling history. Then, in the 1970s, a series of important events occurred relating to the Makah's fishing past and their reserved treaty rights. The first was a storm that exposed the well-preserved remains of Ozette, one of 5 ancient traditional Makah villages. Over 55,000 artifacts, some 2,000 years old, were recovered from this site.
Really what it did was validate the teachings of our elders to the younger people, in saying that, you know, we were whalers, and here's what we will not know: sailing canoe or whaling canoe went whaling.
I had heard about these things in stories and just in my dad and grandpa talking about activities that were done a long time ago.
Now, because of the excavation, you had these same elders talking about whale hunts, holding a 500-year-old harpoon shaft in their hand, explaining, you know, what it meant to be out whaling. Men were alive at the time of the excavation who had been on whale hunts. And so we were able to learn a lot in a real short span of time because of the presence of the artifacts.
As you deal more and more with living the life that our ancestors lived, you just marvel at how they could do some things, you know. Who could ever imagine of going into the woods and coming out with a canoe and coming out with harpoons, knowing how to put them all together, using mussel shell and taking hair seals and turning them inside out and making big float bags out of them. It's an enormous amount of brain power going into that.
For us, you know, if this museum wasn't here, we would just be who we are anyway. But what it did was, all the words of our elders, that, you know, all the things that we had been told about, you know, here it was. You could physically see it.
The second major event was the creation of the Endangered Species Act of 1973. Gray whales, because their numbers were still so low due to the over-harvesting by commercial whalers, were among the first species placed on the endangered list when the ESA became law. During the same time, another major event was taking place in the federal courts. The 1974 ruling in U.S. versus Washington, more commonly referred to as the Bolt decision, upheld the tribe's treaty reserved rights. The landmark case established the Treaty Indian tribes as co-managers of the salmon resource with the state of Washington. The ruling, which was upheld by the United States Supreme Court, allocated to the tribes half of the harvestable number of salmon, returning to the tribe's traditional fishing areas. In the decades that followed, the Makah have worked side by side with the state of Washington, the federal government, and others to restore, protect, and enhance all of the natural resources of their traditional lands and nature as a whole.
Our tribe has the same interest, the same philosophy as the Save the Whale attitude that I think really was beneficial in bringing back whale populations to their historical levels. The place, I guess, where we're different is when they get there, we want to reintroduce them back into our culture, where the other groups may want to set them aside to look at but not to touch, basically.
This population, of which the International Whaling Commission has a scientific committee that does all the monitoring of this northeastern Pacific gray whale population. They have all of the science needed on this population in terms of numbers. It's over 25,000 strong. And today, this population can be harvested by the standards of the scientific committee of the International Whaling Commission at a tune of 484 whales per year can be taken out of this stock, and it will not affect its growth.
I think that's one thing that is really not understood in the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act, that at some point humankind needs to come back in and establish its role of utilization of these species, particularly when we've impacted other resources such as fish, and the food sources that those species use have been minimized, and they can actually start creating a negative effect on certain species because they are now the dominant population. The harbor seal, for instance, which have recovered greatly. I mean, they are probably overpopulated in most places, but there's not the human element there that utilizes that particular species anymore to keep them in balance with their environment. And we are part of the ecosystem as human beings, and we have a role in that balancing of resources, and not be concerned if we're out utilizing sea lions, whales, seals, that type of thing. It's been a part of our culture for a long time, and it does play a very strong role in the balance of resources as a whole.
So any whaling that's will be done in our waters will be done according to what agreement is between our tribal government and Department of Commerce. And when we do harvest the whale, it is done currently under all applicable federal law there is. And at the end of the harvesting season, it's required by the administration to provide a annual report to Department of Commerce and to the International Whaling Commission of all the activities that handle out here. The International Whaling Commission said they would like to deal, if they give a quota, deal with the Whaling Commission. And they found that to work very good with Alaska people especially. So they asked Makah if you wouldn't let the Whaling Commission manage the whale harvesting program.
And then it was, a few months later, we were forming a whaling commission.
All the ins and outs of the whaling commission was to the bylaws, the way the whale was killed, how do we derive it, who was the hunting, the captain picking the captain. There was a lot of issues that the commission had to deal with.
The Whaling Commission selected me to be the captain, and then each family member got to put in 1 or 2 names to be on my team, since I was a commission hunt, not a family hunt. And so each family member had an opportunity to have representatives from their family involved in the hunt.
Well, we had to go deeper than that because we had to come up with rules and regulations and what they have to do in order to say that they were ready to go whaling, that they were ready to go out into the ocean, and lay down all the training rules.
We had planned to do it traditionally all the way until the International Whale Commission, they wanted a quick kill. So that's where the rifle came in. which is probably good, was good for us too, because you know there's the danger to the crew. The rifle helped that.
And then the chase boats, you know, that's again applied to us because nobody wants a strike and lost whale. So that's a requirement put upon us.
But we've always allowed ourselves to take advantage of technological developments, improvements, to make your life a little bit safer, a little bit easier. And for some reason, a lot of people just like to freeze us in the past. And then if you're not doing something the way it was done prior to contact, then you're not really doing it right. Then you're not really doing it in a, you know, in a native way. But we allow other cultures to make changes. One of my friends says, you know, I'm a, you know, white American, but I don't make my butter in a butter churn anymore, and I'm not criticized for that. A lot of folks don't ride in covered wagons anymore, and we don't turn around and say, gee, you're not a real American. You're not a real European American. But unfortunately, we're continually criticized if we do anything different than we did 500 years ago.
I think Makah was more scrutinized in a whale hunt than any nation in the world. And we're just a little 27,000 acre parcel of land in the United States here, but we're under the microscope of the entire world, and I think just about everybody knows where the Makah Reservation is. And I find that ironic here that we had to do that just to be able to exercise a treaty right, and something that our forefathers protected for us.
As we work here, you know, we, well, work with this group over here or this agency or something like that and adhere to their regulation. But, you know, through this all, there's a higher authority. And we all must be aware of that higher authority and how we can fall within that realm of the higher authority. Then we do our part, and our Creator will do His part.
There's no other way that we could possibly make our living except through the Great Spirit. That's all.
We understand that, you know, the whale has a spirit, and that's part of the ritual, is to usher that spirit into the next world in a way that it's accepted by its ancestors.
The whale was given to us, and through that comes prayer, thankfulness, and a way of life centered around that, which developed this culture of a praying people, really. In today's terms, a praying people.
You can see it in our preparation for the whaling. You know, they go up and fast and pray for 10 days, get in their private place, and just get prepared for what they want to do.
Are you just focusing on that whale and the spiritual and the prayers and all the stuff that is done for a crew, for a whaling team, to take that life, to receive that life? It has to be right. If not, it won't happen.
You can't separate, again, physical and spiritual and mental preparedness, because they all are, just like language and culture, they're all intertwined with a person preparing for whaling.
Well, they have our Makah management plan has a series of things that they basically like a checklist of things that they want you to do. They want you to do like approaches on whales, and you got to be able to tread water, and you know, your drug and alcohol. You got to have a UA and make sure that you're clean.
It's not the easiest thing. There's a lot of hard training, running, you know, paddling. You know, there's just a lot of physical things that has to happen.
You know, we went out there the first time, and to watch that whale and how graceful and agile it was, and see us out there. This is like September when we first went out. I was like, man, we are so outclassed, man. This thing has got us and just laughing at us. There's just no way we're going to catch up to that. It's just moving so smooth.
It took them a while to understand a lot of the things that were passed on, you know, from oral history of what they had to do in order to get ready to go whaling.
One of the things that I was really proud of was our paddlers. You know, they took a beating on their people, called them everything under the sun, and
crossing the bow, calling them dirty, ugly, so-and-so Indians and stupid killers.
You are not spiritual in any way. You are evil. Evil.
Probably the worst thing was one of the boats with two guys in it came by and threw a flare at us. And that came close, and that would have been bad because we had all the cruise equipment in our boat plus gas. And
my feeling is that she was going to cut us in half on the second one because she was just getting ready to head forward when she looked and saw the Coast Guard. So she's squared straight up to us directly to center her canoe. So I don't know if she wanted to skip right over the top or what her intentions were, but it didn't seem that good to me.
My youngest was in the preschool, our Head Start program here, and they would go on the bus to their Head Start, and they had comments like that: "Are they going to shoot us, or what are they going to do?" So even amongst the little kids, there were uneasiness, or you're questioning safety.
I think they're out of line, they're protesters. We have that treaty to go by.
Not only is it just a reserved right, treaty right, but for some people it's a hereditary birthright. And that's what, a lot of people were just totally oblivious to.
What's all the stink about? I still don't understand why they don't like it. We're not hurting anybody. We only take what we need. We've been brought up that way. Even if we go fishing, if it's for our own use, just like we'd buy in a store, we just get what we need, and that's the way we'll get our whale. Only what we could use, and none of it will go to waste.
Another point has been circulated in the media stating that we should simply go out there and touch a whale. Get everything all ready, do the whole business, get out there and then touch it, and then come back home and feel successful.
That would be like all of the fasting and all of the readings of the Bible and all of the sacrifices one would make in say, like the Catholic religion. And then you go into the church, and then the Father asks you to come forward for the Holy Communion, and you go up there and you're like this. No, you can't have the wafer. Then you just go. It doesn't complete.
Many of the folks who offer that idea say this is what they did in the plains, the counting coup. I know nothing of counting coup. I've not heard that in anything that I've experienced. But from the folks that I've talked to about it, it was an act committed between one warrior and another. And we are not at war with the whales.
And then there were a lot of folks, though, who came forward and said, we're environmentalists, and we understand the importance of conservation of species. We don't see how you taking a limited number of whales a year will have any impact on the overall population of whales, and we want to make sure you don't associate us with some of these more irrational and radical, animal rights activists who are going out of their way to, really destroy your lives. So there were a lot of responsible people who do have concerns about, mammals and the environment, who, might not want to eat whale meat, but certainly knew that they wouldn't go out of their way to try to stop us, because they knew we were being, responsible and respectful in this process.
But if you look at our history, our practices in fisheries, our land management, our forest management that we currently have developed ourselves, we're a self-governing tribe, and we've had opportunity to really structure our management more in our philosophical practices and that have been taught to us. So if you look at our forest management practices, we've expanded riparian zones, we've expanded our steep slope management, we've preserved much of our remaining old growth. We've really been able to not only incorporate our historical understanding of sustainability and trying to balance other resources with timber harvest. But we were also able to involve our community in what they would like to see, how they would like to see their forests managed and their resources managed.
And it's one thing to go out and access that resource, but it's another thing to maintain that resource and the strength that would allow a harvest, regulated harvest on that resource. And that's the driving force behind our tribal government, is to have that resource, to manage it, and have a harvesting program that the resource will still remain strong through all of their efforts.
Makah's staff is, we have 4 professional biologists on our staff. We've always maintained a professional biologist within our management program. And they are the educated, the trained, the scientists basically that evaluate everything that we do and how we are impacted or affect other tribes or states, and work jointly with their scientists to develop our fisheries and sustain our resources. And our philosophy is the resources come first, the sustainability of those resources, and then we consider our fisheries.
You can look at our hatchery, our rivers here. There's rivers all up and down the west coast. There's endangered species on some salmon. Look at our rivers here, they're all healthy. We have excess amount of fish in our rivers because our fishermen will hold off from fishing and wait to make sure that we got a good run. Now we have a good run every year.
If you go to the hatchery during this month, you'll see 50-pound Chinook coming back, 40 pounds. I mean, big native stock Chinook salmon coming back. And there is a fishery on there. I mean, what a story. So yeah, we take care of our environment, and we certainly want to make sure that we don't allow things to disappear on our watch.
Once people learn that whales are not endangered, are actually at probably larger numbers than they ever have been before, when they learn about how central whaling always has been to our identity, and learn the way that we carefully managed other resources, usually the arguments diminish.
And we try and err on the side of caution in terms of the resource. So by Makah now utilizing gray whales once again, we're going to be there with the United States, trying to make sure that the species is doing well, the stock's doing well. And the more we depend on it, the harder we're going to fight for making sure that adequate management measures are being taken so that we can always have that species. So we never have to go through a period of time again when we don't have gray whales available to us.
So there's a lot of history, and like a lot of the old people say, we know the whale and he understands us, we understand him. So before we go on a whale hunt, we pray for the whale to give us his life. And the actual day before the hunt, we did a lot of that with the elder out on the beach, and like the headmen, another one headman came out and did a prayer circle with us, and with the feather and the smoke. And surprisingly, the next morning it happened.
Yeah, we all knew that day that when we just got up and just kind of had that kind of grin. We were like, yeah, today's the day. And then we got together and we prayed, and then we put the canoe in the water, and we got through the surf. Then we kind of got in a little argument, all of us. I don't know, I think it's more just the nerves and the adrenaline of everything. And then got together again and held hands and said our things and thanked Creator for the morning, and away we went. And it wasn't a fast paddle, just nice and smooth. Everybody's quiet and calm. It was just a ready day, so we got there and there was nobody around, so that was real nice. Just us in the water, and yeah, so it was a good day.
I probably got out there about maybe a half hour before they struck the whale. The observer was right behind me, a guy from NOAA. Just as soon as I got there was no protesters there, no other boats in sight except for a couple media boats. There was whales in the area, and the canoe was coming over to approach us in the chase boat. We had some gear in there and an extra paddler, and as they were approaching us, there was a whale in the line, and they struck, and we said, well, they're off, we're finally off.
We just believe that. It came to us, so everything all clicked together like it was supposed to. So we put the harpoon in and gave it a little extra thrust just to make sure. And then, as my friend says, we got our free ride finally, so we got a tow.
The crew looked like they'd done it 1,000 times. The harpoon was driven home. The harpooner reached in, retrieved his harpoon shaft, put it back in the canoe. The crew was paying out the line. No rush, just like they'd done it 1,000 times.
It's really moving, you know, really exciting at first, and then, you know, then there's a bit of remorse and stuff for taking such a big life, you know. But I guess it's natural for to feel that way.
I think the spiritual way that I really believe that whale gave himself, and we had to bring him to the beach, just like it's supposed to have been.
We are pretty much just guided by our creators. That we did things in the best manner and the safest way that we could for the times that we had to deal with a lot of things, you know. So not just the whale, but helicopters and boats and people that didn't pretty much care for what we were doing. But we still brought something home to eat, and not just for our stomachs, but for our minds and our hearts and everything.
It was hard to describe what the feelings of the people were. They're so intense and feeling that there is so much feelings and emotions about what happened today is what we used to do many, many years ago for thousands of years, and we did finally do that.
The whole community loved it, I thought. Anyway. It wasn't like the protest, oh, it stinks and it's no good and they won't eat it, they won't like it. We ate it right down to the bone and saved the skeleton. We're going to put the skeleton here in the museum. The high school kids put it together for us.
And it's shared with everybody. It's not just yours. Never is just yours. That whale came ashore because, you know, you said that you treat it well.
And when we got our whale, the tribe put on a dinner and basically invited the world. And they came from all over. We had people from Africa, South America, Europe, all over Europe, and Japan. Wherever there's humanity, we had them here, India Bay.
And we got the whale for our identity and for a cause that is so great.
And what encourages me now is that there's songs. They're making songs. If you got the language, you're always going to be able to make new songs. And that should say it all. That's an alive culture. You're not just singing a song because it was passed down from generation to generation, but we're making a song because we're whaling again, or we went to the Judge Bolt decision, or whatever journey or struggle we're going through right now. We do what our ancestors did. We carve a pole, we tell a story, we make up a song, we carry it on, that we don't forget who we are. And then that's alive, see? And then it gives your people a reason to be who they are.
We did certainly see a lot of people who were presented, when they were presented with the facts, they ended up really being able to understand, if not support, our resumption of whaling. But there are always going to be people who have a real philosophical or even religious position against it. Some people don't believe in hunting at all. We happen to have a very, very long history, and most people around the entire world have a long history of hunting. And we're not ashamed of it. We don't believe anything's wrong with it. It's sustainable.
And knowing an issue like this, the opposition is always going to be there. The only thing that I would have to say about that bothers me is that if they would tell the truth, if you can tell the truth, things will be all right. And that's what we're trying to communicate to the public is, here's what the Makahs are about, here's what we do, and give them the truth, you know, and let them draw their own conclusions.
We are Kodichtiat people. We've completed the circle. We reclaimed everything we used to do as Makahs.